What's your perspective on blue collar people don't want to read books and don't want to learn
Uh,
and grow like this?
that is an absolute falsehood. The way we've been doing it is I do bring people in before they're ever hired and while they're waiting to speak with a few different people that we need them to speak to get feedback. While they're waiting, I say, hey, I want to show you something. Let me show you this book. While you're waiting, giving ourselves grace, not excuses. Because I started discovering that and discovering, okay, I'm addressing these issues that I have because we all got them, emotional issues. Why do I respond the way I do? And this is not something that you just find out and that's it in your story. It's something you continuously have to do, right?
It's a lot
But
of
when I
work.
started becoming aware of, okay, this is why the way I am, and I asked my husband,
Hello, and thanks for watching the Real People Getting Real Results show today. It's got a special guest, Miss Kym Hernandez, and thanks for being on, Kym.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for the folks watching, just so you know, real quick, this is also goes out on my audio podcast, the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. But Kym is one of those folks out there that's making it happen. I mean, I'm really privileged to have you on, Kym, and you're our first HR director, HR manager. I know your title's director, but we haven't had an HR manager, anyone in your role, so it'll be cool to get your perspective. And so, how do we know each other? It goes back several years, I know.
Yes, it does. So I work for a company called Element Designs, and I started here as a single HR department. I am actually still a one-person HR department. So when I started looking for different ways that I can help my frontline workers here because we are a manufacturer. Do some personal development. And I thought that was going to be really easy, that I was just going to Google something and it's going to come up and I have all these choices of all these things that I can get for them. I was really looking for something pretty simple, but I didn't want to throw a 500-page book at folks, right?
Yeah.
And I was very surprised because it was blue collar leadership and Mac's story that came up, and it was the only thing that came up. So I started looking at the resource of blue collar leadership, and I said, this looks really good. Um, and there was your number, so I just gave you a call out of the blue, and lo and behold, you answered the phone, which was very surprising. We must have stayed on the phone for at least an hour. I just remember it was a long conversation, and I started to explain to you what I was looking for, and you validated that, yeah, that growth and personal development, although, I mean, anybody could read anything and benefit from it, but something that's written from the perspective of someone who's on the front line in a service industry is just sorely lacking. It's usually just some type of, app or electronic resource or some type of seminar that someone just, sends their corporate managers for the day. And somehow they're magically transformed, or at least the thought is, into these great leaders, but nothing really from the perspective of someone who's working on the front line on the floor. So we did agree with that. And that's how I met you. And that's how I got introduced to Ria.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it was cool because you guys are you've been in North Carolina, but you just moved barely across the state line into South Carolina, basically still in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, right?
Yes, we're right still in the Charlotte Metro. We're a couple miles down where we were before. And a lot of that attributes, of course, to growth, because when I met you, we had been in our location at the time about 15 years, I think somewhere around 15 years. And we were bursting at the seams as far as just space is concerned. Just
Yeah.
imagine a manufacturer that has to go through small breezeways to transport products. And so now we moved into a brand new, beautiful facility right across the border in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And we're very happy about it. It's a beautiful facility.
Yeah, that was awesome. We got to stop by and see you guys not too long ago. So that was 2018
Yes,
when
you
we first
did.
started talking. So it's been 6 years, and we've been up a couple of times to talk to you and your team. And the first time, that was when we really met all of you. Right? Was we
Mm-hmm.
come up and we talked. Y'all brought a couple of different groups into the break room, and we talked. You remember what that was like for
That
you?
was, yes. At the time, we had limited space, so we had a smaller break room, and you yourself and Ria, you actually went in there and you started speaking about growth. And I remember the illustration you used about a good leader you compared it to being like on a kayak and
Oh
you
yeah.
wanted to get to exactly. And I don't know if Archie or somebody drew the picture of the kayak on the whiteboard, but
Yeah.
how a good leader really points, okay, we want to go there, and allows the person who's steering to get there by their, by their methods. They're not telling them exactly when to put the paddle down each time in the water, because that's micromanaging. But
Yeah.
we had a captive audience that day, and everybody was really quiet. You can hear a pin drop because I think it resonated a lot. But yeah, you guys came in, we spoke about that. Hot and ready donuts. If you know, you know.
Yeah. You remember it all.
I do, because I was taking a lot of notes on that, because again, I mean, the reason why I called you initially is because it's just needed. It's needed to service people. And what I have found is, generally speaking, people who are in industries like ours, who are frontline team members, and a lot of times these are entry level positions, correct? That most, or a good percentage rather, have not ever read a leadership book, or they haven't even listened to a podcast, or it's not even that they didn't want to, it's just something that they weren't really exposed to. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
times it's just about survival every day, and that just means pounding the pavement. So all of this other stuff doesn't seem like, oh, that's not for me, or that doesn't apply to me, that only applies to that group of people. And I recognize that perception absolutely had to have change, has to change, because you have these two groups of the haves, or the perception of the haves, and the perception of the have-nots.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to have unity in an organization if that's the perception.
Yeah. So were you nervous bringing us in, or had you brought in people like us before to speak to the workforce anywhere that you've been in the past even?
To be honest, this was the great experiment. I've never done that before. I've never been in a role where I had really the authority to do that. But if I'm going to just stop for a moment here, the reason why this happened is because I had supportive management. So we had our CEO, Mike Ubersachs. When I brought him the idea of saying, hey, I talked to this Matt guy. He's really down home, country, just like says it like it is. And he's like, really? Yeah, really. I really think we need to talk to him. This is the price of the books and all the details of what that entailed. I think this is a really good idea, because it really sticks to the basics, and it's not bells and whistles and all the things that people feel like they have to learn. It's really just, let's have a conversation. Let's teach us how to do it. And that's, at the time you sent me the information, I think it was March, about how to, be certified, how to have a book study, in which we actually, after you guys came in, we launched that, and we studied the first I call it the blue book, but the
Yeah.
blue collar leadership book. We studied with everybody in the organization. At the time, I think we were roughly around 75 or so. And it was a great experiment, because we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we had the information and the guidelines from you, but you're talking with different people, sometimes different languages, and figuring that out. And I actually did get it in Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we made it work. And we still have people here that are still here since 2018, quite a few actually, and they do remember that. So this is not something that was one and done. And as we did call you in again to do a repeat, because this
Yeah.
stuff was really important to us.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Mike, I remember that day when we came the first time. I remember Mike. He had on seemed like he had on the blue shirt and had his name tag on a patch. Like he looked like everybody else, and
Yes, he
he's
did.
the CEO, the owner of the company. I know there's several owners, if I remember right. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just one, but Mike is in the CEO role, and he took me out and toured me around, and just like you do when we were there. You know everybody. Mike knows everybody. That's how you know you're in a good company that actually cares about the people. Some companies, Kym, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, but it's not you and your company. But sometimes we go through and the leaders will take us on a tour like that. They don't even acknowledge the people, not much less say
Yeah.
their names and interact with them. They don't even acknowledge them whatsoever. We just walk through. I'm trying to acknowledge them and say hello, and but it's not the leaders, and you can tell they need it though. So it's good, and we're happy that we're in there. But we know when we go in an organization like yours where the people are happy. They were happy when we were up there just a few months back when we come by to see the new building, and everybody seems like they're happy. I know there are people, and there's times when things are not so happy, but they're not putting on a show. They feel good about you and the leadership in the organization. Is that what
Yeah.
you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, yes. And one of the things that it's really important to myself as well as to our leadership. We have, you had mentioned we have Beata Clutcher, we have Kevin Creedon, we have Mike Ubersack, and others, um, is transparency. So transparency, not just in showing them, okay, this is where we want to go, but also transparency is who we are as people.
Yeah.
It's important for me to not portray a sense of, oh, okay, we have it all together and this is exactly, what you need to do and to follow, because we are all imperfect. And it's okay that we don't always get it right. And we encourage, or at least we do encourage people to say, okay, what is the feedback for us? What do we have? What are you missing? I mean, even on the onboarding process, I've just recently introduced a survey monkey, which, if you know what that is, it's just an
Yep.
online survey, but we've just called it for our new hires, just to say, okay, we need you to tell us what your new onboarding experience. We tell you what we think it is, but it doesn't matter what we think it is. What do you think it is? Is the new hire experience, and the team members as well. What's your feedback on the new hire? That way, when we have that conversation, ideally in a couple of weeks after they start, we want to know what the first impression is. Not because I want to hear all the good things that we do. I actually rather hear all the things that we're not doing right.
Yeah.
Or at least what the perception is, even if we're doing it right. I want to hear the perception of that team member, because I want to get that written down. It doesn't mean that we have necessarily the capacity to fix it tomorrow, but at least the awareness would be helpful, because if we can't fix something right away, it just goes such a long way to go back out, in particular, like the production floor, and say, hey, I hear you. We can't fix it tomorrow or right away, but I heard what you're saying, and we're going to do the best that, to keep that in mind. And this is how we're going to do it. I think people, for the most part, just need to feel validated and acknowledged
Yeah.
that they're heard. And I don't think we do it perfectly. I don't think any company does it perfectly, because times change. We have different generations that are mixing together, different expectations. And so
Yep.
we have to learn to adapt to that environment. And it's going to be a mix of the way, it's like the great experiment. We have to keep molding the way we do things, and adapting to different ways.
Yeah. That's outstanding what you guys are doing. And you talked about Mike and Kevin. I'm gonna see if I can get them to come on here. I'd like to, see their perspective and everything too, because Kevin's the VP of sales, Mike is the CEO owner again. So be neat to see their perspective of what you guys are doing. And one thing I ask a lot of people like you that we get on, the leaders, because I get people all over this country. I hear them all the time saying, "But blue collar people don't want to read books." So I know you bought a lot of books. You just bought a lot more. You ordered like 20 or 30 just the last week or so. Again, so
I did.
you're not throwing these things in the garbage. I assume somebody's reading them. So what's your perspective on blue collar people don't want to read books and don't want to learn and grow like this?
That is an absolute falsehood. I think what people would make assumptions. Now, there are some people that prefer not to read, just because of whatever personal filter. Maybe they're just not good readers or whatever.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that they don't like to learn. So there's just different ways that you can promote it, and which is why I felt it was so important to have something in a simplified format. I don't need necessarily introduce people that the first chapter is all this philosophical, jargon about the brain and everything. I find it fascinating, but for the average person, that's just not very interesting. So we need to really talk about, to the core of what's in people's hearts, the principles. And the way this book, and which is why I was really embraced it, really took just 5 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on the person's reading skill, to really go over what the principle is, and then see how it applies in a situation that they can relate to, so it can sink in a little bit. What we do now, we have these welcome packs that we're giving to new hires. It's nothing, just little diddly doos and
Yeah.
whatever, pins, but I do include the book.
Oh,
So when
outstanding. The Frontlines book.
the
The blue
frontline
book.
book, which
Yep.
it's an experiment too, because obviously I don't want it wasted. But
Yep.
typically, the way we've been doing it is I do bring people in before they're ever hired, and while they're waiting to speak with a few different people that we need them to speak to get feedback. While they're waiting, I say, hey, I want to show you something. Let me show you this book. while you're waiting to have your turn to speak, I want you to look at this, because this really tells a story of where our company wants to go as far as self or introduces as far as self-improvement for people. This is the standard. And I
Yeah.
want you to take a look at it. What do you think about it? And you'd be surprised. The first thing usually is like, can I have this? Is this mine? Oh, I'm definitely going to read this. Now it could be
Right.
buttering me up a little bit too, but for the most part, I think it's sincere. I actually had a team member not call, but ask, hey, they call me Miss Kym for whatever reason. I guess I look old, but
They respect you. That's why they respect you. They like you. They appreciate you.
I said, Miss Kym, I feel Southern.
You don't look old.
So,
You look about 20.
oh, well, I definitely not, but hey, I will definitely take that. So I said, yeah. They said, can I talk to you a little bit about? I need to get your suggestion, but it's absolutely nothing to do with work. It had to do with personal development. That doesn't have anything to do with me necessarily, but it just shows that we have a lot of people who want growth, and if given the attention, or at least a little bit of attention and acknowledgement, you plant a seed, even if it doesn't germinate right then, it's gonna still be in that soil.
Yeah.
So if you water it a little bit, the likelihood of it actually having growth is very high. Now, some people grow really fast. Some people, it's very slow, but it's still growth.
Yeah.
So this is why, as a company, although we don't do it perfectly, and we're still working on our consistencies, like every company would, it has never been a thought of, oh, you know what, we don't need to do that anymore. It's
You're
just
gonna
a
do
given.
something.
We're doing it. We're gonna do something.
There you go. That's right. That's what you can't ever stop. It's not one of those things that it's like eating. You can't stop eating.
Hmm.
You got to keep eating to stay alive, and you got to keep growing and developing people to keep
Exactly.
your momentum going. You're either growing or slowing is what I tell people. There's no holding steady in this space.
It's interesting. We did, as mentioned, go through the whole book study, and then for those who were in a lead or leadership position, we did a separate one, having them all in a room that I did with the Green Book for blue
Yeah,
collar
the
leadership
blue
and
collar leadership and
supervision.
supervision. Yep.
And supervision, right? So we were in the room and started talking about it from that perspective. And I'm telling you, I'm going to be transparent with it. I was quite surprised, not at just the fact that we were having the conversations, but a lot of I don't want to call it negative, but a lot of the feelings came out of how they really felt about things, about, well, are you sure this works? But I don't see this in my personal life. I don't know if this is going to work, but that's not what I see modeled. We were able to get all those things on the table. Sometimes it got a little bit intense, and so I had to
Yeah.
be a moderator, but it's better to have the conversation than to not and try to avoid the conversation, because
Yeah.
even later on, we did have someone who left that called me specifically and said, I just want to tell you, I finally, this is after a few years, I finally understanding what you were trying to say, which was basically what the book was saying. I'm like, well, that was really humble for you to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I hope you can take it forward. Yeah.
And that's rewarding for you. So since you're talking
Right.
about that real quick, tell me and all the folks who are watching or listening, who is Kym? How did you get on
No.
this journey? I know your personal growth and development journey started long before me, but anything you want to share about yourself, your personal journey, your professional journey, let's
Sure.
talk about that.
Oh, sure. Well, I am a complicated person. Ask my husband. So, you know, how it's interesting. I had to think about that because I actually asked myself the same question. I grew up in a very humble beginnings, not wealthy by any means. In fact, kind of lived in the very poor part of town. So we did not have much materially, but what the foundation that I did have, and I'm very thankful for, I had two loving parents that had a very moral foundation when it came to principles, which is what we always talk about. It's principles, right? Not rules,
Yep,
principles.
absolutely. Yep.
Exactly. And principles and boundaries. So one thing that they really tried to say is like, you know what, if you put your mind to something, you really want something, you just have to be consistent and go get it. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something. Right. I appreciate that. Did they do it perfectly? Of course not. Just like I don't do it perfectly with my own kids. But that foundation was so important because it really did encourage reading. It encouraged developmental skills where you're developing reasoning skills.
Yeah.
So the main thing was they had mentioned always ask the question why do I believe this? Why does this matter? So as I got a little older, I gravitated more towards just personal development. At first it was a little imbalanced because it was like I have to do it all the way. Why do you have to do it? I don't know, I just have to. And it could be things I wasn't even interested in, which is, not exactly the idea, but it did at least exercise that muscle of wanting to do the best that I could, and no matter what I was doing, which is not a bad quality. It's a good quality. You just have to make sure you're using it in a purposeful way, right?
Yep.
So I had to learn purpose. The other thing is when I got a little bit older, because I had that foundation, I started thinking, okay, I do read. And, I like to listen to things that, especially now we have the technology podcast. Then it's easy to get sucked into a little bit of a hole of, oh, I'm hearing all these people telling me how wonderful this new way of thinking is, or if I just follow these steps, then, I would be on my path to being very successful. And then I started asking, well, then why don't I feel that way? I'm following these things. Why don't I exactly feel that way? And then it got me thinking, first, you have to get to know why you're the way you are first, or at least concurrently, so you can understand where you come from a developmental side. And then you can look at all these wonderful tools that you're given as far as, you should do things this way or how to organize your life. And you can see them through the filters of where you came from. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
In that way, you can apply them in a better way. So as far as personal growth, it turned a little bit to looking at, let me just look at what baggage I bring to the world and why. What is my baggage?
We all have some, don't we?
We've got them. We've all got them. You could have the best upbringing. You can have the most, traumatic upbringing. We still all have baggage,
Absolutely.
So if we can start unpacking why we're the way we are, I found out for myself, and this was really one of the things I think that catapulted, was I started realizing that a lot of the reason why I did the things I did is because I had a mindset of scarcity and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep.
So meaning that it just wasn't enough. I had to keep going, pushing. And for the most part, I think our culture teaches us that that's a good thing, because we want to be ambitious to a degree, and we want to not be stagnant, but it doesn't usually encourage mindfulness of where we are. And if we're going to bring it full circle, because I started discovering that and discovering, okay, I'm addressing these issues that I have, because we all got them, emotional issues. Why do I respond the way I do? And this is not something that you just find out and that's it in your story. It's just something you continuously have to do, right?
It's a lot of work.
When I started becoming aware of, okay, this is why the way I am, and I asked my husband, why am I the way I am? Let me take a look at that a little bit. When I started doing that, it was really helpful, because I started to see in other people mirroring some things that I would see in myself. So you can probably see why this passion of blue collar leadership, why I was passionate about that for the people that I work with, because I could see the difference that it makes in my personal life, mindfulness and being aware. And when I see those same pattern behaviors that I recognize, instead of labeling it as, oh, they're just this, or they're just lazy, or they don't want to work, or all these negative things, everybody has a story. Yep. And it's true. We should be giving ourselves grace, not excuses. There's a difference. So I would like to give people grace, but not excuses. Expose, okay, perhaps they're just not aware that the things that they believe in, as far as what behavior should be like, they're not aware that it's not pulling them forward.
Yeah.
So if I'm not going to do it, I don't know who else is doing it, or if just give it a chance and let people decide, because you never know. Again, it may not be while they're working here but it might be somewhere down the line that things start to make sense. So as long as the seed is planted and it's watered, I think that's good. But as far as I am concerned, you'd mentioned I went back to I went back to work.
It's all right, Kym. Could I ask you something right there before you go to that next
Yeah.
thing? So, because one thing I really love about you is, again, we meet a lot of HR folks. We meet all kind of people, right, all across the country, and you already know what I'm about to say, but I want you to talk to it to people who are listening, maybe they're in an HR role, or maybe they're just aspiring to be, but they're not already. But we see a lot of HR folks who are in the role, but they don't really focus on developing the people. I think they should, because that's, to me, that's what HR should. I mean, is all about the people. But we see most of them that we see, and they're not bad people. They're just not expected to develop the people. Most of them are, it's about the management side of it, all the people processes, the legal stuff, the health stuff, the just interacting with the people. So you just shared what makes you unique in that role, because same thing that makes me unique. I learned this stuff too, and learned how it changed my life. And that's why I appreciate companies like you guys, because y'all allow me to come in and help you help the people. And then you're on today doing this to help me help the people, and I'm helping you help the people. And that's what we do, right? Me and you. But why do you think there's just not that much emphasis in the HR department really on developing the people? Or am I wrong? Because you know a lot more HR people personally than I do, probably.
Yeah.
But do the ones do what you guys are doing, or do they not do that, most of them?
Well, I would probably guess that it kind of depends on the role that they have. If they're in a bigger organization, you have more of the bureaucracy. Probably don't step under my toes or step out of your box. That could probably, I don't know for sure, but that could
Yeah.
probably have. But in reality, I think what happens is people are just tired. And like a lot of positions, if they're not really loving what they're doing, but they're in there for a paycheck, which is a lot of people,
In every
they're
role.
just, yes, in every role, even in leadership roles and whatever. Sometimes
Yep.
it's, let me just get enough to get the job done so I can stay afloat. I've got all my issues at home. I've got all my bricks in my backpack, so to speak, that I have to carry around.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily intentional, where it's like, oh, I just don't want to develop people. I think a lot of it has to do with not knowing how. And then you put yourself in a very vulnerable position when you do make a decision to develop people. Because in order for people to want to be developed, you have to have a level of vulnerability with them yourself. Because when you have a level of vulnerability, you're saying, hey, I want to share something with you that's helped me, therefore declaring I have a weakness.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very uncomfortable with that, because in general, unless that's just your personality, vulnerability is not comfortable. I think people would rather, and a lot of times this does happen, which is why sometimes leadership development becomes this type of soapbox where I'm up here declaring what everybody else should do and how I have a perfect method.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you should follow me, and everybody's applauding or whatever. But that's not really what it is. It's most of it is just by example, and by someone actually revealing, okay, I have weaknesses too. I'm just like you. It's not really a culture that we live in that encourages that. Mostly you have to step outside and be vulnerable yourself in order for people to hear your story and really hear it. That's really where development is, where you talk about building trust in your book a lot. That's where
Okay.
that trust comes from. It does come from, part of it could be about your position, because people tend to trust people in higher positions. So maybe, depends. But it also comes with kind of a feeling, are you trustworthy? And do you see me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that takes effort. And I think that's why it's a harder thing to do
Do you
for a lot.
think?
It becomes, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I said it becomes, in my opinion, I think what happens in a lot of organizations, it becomes more just a process to say that you're doing it. Like, see, this is what we've done. We've given a card on the birthday, or we've done this and that. I'm not saying that organizations should not do those things, but if that's what it is, that's not development.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you see
Yeah.
those management duties that you have, all the stuff that
Mhm.
every HR director or HR manager has to do, what's usually is normally the job? Have you seen that stuff's easier for you because you do the relationship building, the leadership development, you build these relationships with people? Does that make your, what I'm gonna call you, I guess, your real job? Does that make that easier and better, or doesn't really
uh,
make a difference? What do you think?
I wouldn't say, I would say it's neutral, only because those are the boring details of the job, all the legal compliance and all the things that you have to pull and push. Naturally, I am an enabler in a good way, not the bad
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Like, that's where my strengths lie. So it's not my favorite part of the job anyway, the administrative side, but I'm good at it. So I don't know if you know Patrick Lucioni with his
Yeah.
six working. Okay, so um, I'm referring to a survey that I took, talking about where you work best in. But in another way, it does make it easier in the sense that I feel much happier when I feel like I've connected with people. And that way, it helps me to do the things in my job that aren't my favorite, but
Yeah.
necessary nonetheless.
So it helps you. It don't necessarily, it's kind of neutral relative to doing the work, but dealing with the people side of the work side, it does make it better because you got a relationship with the people.
Exactly.
There's not, because a lot of times, I mean, I know from my own experience, my 20 years in manufacturing, most of the ones I was interacting with, there was not really good relationship between the workforce and HR department, because it was more like they were the police instead of they were, most of them were not really for us. It was like they were helping the managers manage us, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
not a real good relationship. But if we'd had somebody like you, we would have actually known you. You would have been taking us through all this development. We would have seen you as an ally for us, as you're on our team. But you also would have been on the leadership team. You would actually
Hmm.
be leading the organization from the HR department, and I'm sure that's a big role that you have, because you guys, there's a lot of you guys that are bought into leadership development. So anybody at any level who's bought into this can help lead the organization, even those folks on the front lines. So I
Hmm.
don't want to get too far
Absolutely.
on that. I was just curious about your opinion. But what were you about to share? You had a note or something there. You was going to continue with your story a second ago.
I didn't forgot already.
Oh, I thought you had it written down over there. I'm sorry.
No, no. I forgot the trajectory we were on, but as far as just work is concerned, what fuels, if you're talking about me in a personal sense, what
Yep.
fuels me is I get excited when I can get in front of people. I'd mentioned about the 6 types of working genius, which is the assessment I took that Robert Lucioni, kind of headed, and I did that 4 years ago. And one of the things that it came up with was, what was it? I got to look what it was. An enablement and, yes, discernment. It was
Oh yeah.
enablement and discernment, meaning that part of my strength is to be able to sit in front of somebody and kind of hear what they're saying behind what they're saying, and have that conversation. So I think that's just like, everybody has their own gifts. It doesn't make me better. It just makes it, that's just my particular strengths. So when I go out on the floor, especially the production floor, I know everybody's names, their first and last, their story, what's going, kind of happening in their life. If they happen to want to share that with me, I can ask them about it. And it doesn't feel like oh, let's go see HR. It's like, oh, let's go see Miss Kym. Now, I do understand that in a larger organization, you're going to lose that a bit, but I think the principle should still be there, um, where people feel like they can have some type of connection, or at least be heard and validated, even if the answer to them is no, we can't do what you're requesting at the moment or yet, but we still want to hear you.
Yeah. That that's good stuff. So how what's next for you guys? Tell me. Actually, I'm talking about Element Designs as a whole,
Hmm.
but tell me, if you don't mind, tell me about what you guys do. There may be some people listening that are
Yeah,
in the
sure.
Charlotte area who might want to check you guys out.
So we actually, our main product that we produce is aluminum frame beautiful doors. Most of the
Absolutely.
time, aren't they though? They're awesome. But most of the time, they're glass inserts. Sometimes they're customized with acrylic inserts. So what I would tell somebody is, said, okay, if you can imagine if LeBron James wanted to go in his closet and show off, his collection of sneakers, and he wanted a beautiful door, it would probably be our stuff in there. So
Yeah, look
we
nice.
cater. It would look nice, right? So we cater to the more affluent market, if you will. We've been in business for well over 20 years. Um, that is our main product, but we also do aluminum frame shelving. Aluminum being the main product that we use, highly recyclable, that type of thing. And then now we are just entering into a period where we're going to be fabricating our own glass as well. So
Okay.
we're the front line in innovation, and we consistently are having accounts set up on a daily basis. We are growing, and it is business to business. So if you have a home here in Charlotte, we're not necessarily going to walk in our building and say, "Hey, can you make me that?" Because our main partners are going to be the cabinet shop owners, the closet shops, architects and designers, things like that, depending on the space that they're in.
Okay. So they can go check out your website and see
Yeah,
and learn about the
anybody.
products, and there's probably something on there that tells them where to go
I say
find
some
out
really
who to buy it from.
yeah, there's some cool pictures in there too. So
Yeah,
they
I
can get
mean,
some
it is nice.
ideas on there.
Yeah, I encourage anybody just to check out what they're doing. It's really it is high end stuff. I always wondered.
Hmm.
I tell Rhea sometime. I said that looks like some high end stuff. I don't know if it is high end far as the
It is.
cost, but I know it's it looks like you said. If somebody wanted to in their home to make it look like you said awesome, and even in the kitchen cabinets, if they really have a modern contemporary look, a lot of that stuff it could show up there, or I think of a lot of businesses, people that really want to look very professional in their
Hmm.
headquarters or something like that. I mean, you guys have some awesome stuff.
We call it like the bling or the jewelry in the kitchen or the closet or if it's office space. I mean, that's not the only thing we make. We have other side things too. We have our magnetic marker boards. We have our Deco Lux, Deco Matte. You can go and take a look at the website to take a look at what those materials are. But it is more of a modern, contemporary European design. We go to Eurocachina, which was in Milan, I think, earlier, to kind of see what's trending, and then bring those ideas over to the United States, where of course, we don't really necessarily are used to standardized sizes of kitchens and things like that here,
Yeah, yeah,
but we are adapting to this marketplace.
yeah. So what type jobs? I know I've been through there and seen a lot of it. What type jobs for anybody who not just I mean the frontline jobs and also the office type jobs? What all
Hmm.
type jobs do you guys have in Element Designs?
Sure, yeah. So the main thing that we hire for, of course, because people don't like to leave here for obvious reasons, but our growth in our production floor as well. So we have our different areas of the production floor, from fabrication to assembling the products. The jobs are actually listed on the careers page on our website, which for some
Okay,
reason I checked today and the link was broken. So I put a ticket out there to fix that up, but that should be visible pretty soon. But
okay,
there are jobs up there. And because of our growth too, we have supervisor positions that we for our production floor that are opening, and perhaps even a couple of office positions opening soon to be announced. But
okay,
probably within the week, you'll be able to see any of the positions that are posted directly on the careers page
okay.
on our website, which should be up again shortly.
Yeah, by the time this comes out, a couple of weeks after we recorded it, you probably have all that squared away. So
I'm thinking that it would be, yes,
yeah, that'll be
exactly.
good. And I saw people out there, they're doing a lot of sawing, cutting, assembling.
Hmm.
You guys have a big paint booth back there, at least one,
We have
maybe two.
several. We have our paint robot because we have automation too, as well as our paint booths for different colors. And I'm probably not the best spokesperson on the goings on the production floor, but we kind of look at some innovative cutting edge ways so we can make sure we still have the human touch, but able to produce faster, especially in this environment here. I mean, the Carolinas is humid and hot in the summer.
Yeah.
So when you're specialty coating things, you need to have the right environment. So we give that a lot of attention.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. That's good. I want to make sure you got to plug Element Designs because
Of course.
you do something very unique and you got a great facility. I mean, that new building is awesome. You got the whole package now. You guys
Hmm.
were awesome in the old building, and you were awesome before you started doing the blue
Now it
collar
just looks
leadership.
like it.
What's that? Now it looks like it. Yeah.
Now it also looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, everybody's probably happier to be in the building. And
Yeah, we have a lot of space.
yeah, so I want to just ask if you can reflect on the journey with blue collar leadership content and stuff. Have you the good and the bad of it, both? What's something really positive? Any positive story that it could be personal with you, or it could be one you've heard where someone actually some type of personal transformation, whether it could be at work or in their home life, that you could share without. I mean, if it's positive, maybe you want to tell their name if it's not you, but you don't have to. Just in general.
Well, I don't throw their name out because I didn't have permission, but I do have a couple of people that said that they really did appreciate it and it was very, very helpful in their life. In fact, one of them and gave you a hug
Yeah,
when they
yeah,
were here, right?
yeah.
And the other, I would just say, in addition to a lot of positive feedback, especially with one particular group, they said they really appreciated the complete book study of all 30 chapters because we did do a lot of notes. For those who don't know, part of the teaching is to let people at the end of the chapter kind of speak on it a little bit. What did you feel about this chapter? Two questions. Where do you think you do well on, and what do you think you can work on? Where you think the company could work on? But it's really more about them because it's about looking in the mirror. And okay. And I think that really did help with people being able to speak up about things, especially where culturally they felt that they couldn't, not our culture, but their own personal culture.
Yep.
So that was good. But I will say for me personally, this has helped a lot because even though I was already used to personal development, just learning how to teach it in a way that didn't overcomplicate it and just brought it back down to its fundamentals and being able to have the guideline of exactly how to do that. Because clearly, I'm very wordy. I'm working on it.
You're doing great. I love
I'm
you, Kym.
long-winded a lot of times, but trying to make that simple. But I did want to say, for those who don't know, I do have 3 children. They're all older. My last one is about to be an adult this year, right? So we have incorporated leadership development in my own life. Usually it's Wednesday nights, but they have jobs. So sometimes it's hard to coordinate, but at least it's weekly. Sometimes that changes. Where we sit back and we talk about leadership development in the context of what it means to them. Now, I have to be honest, and we're actually in the middle of studying this, and it was actually Rhea Story's book. It was The Ladder of Influence, the one that's in back of me, I guess, that we actually started doing a family book study.
Okay.
And with notes, and my 17 and my 19-year-old very much enjoy it. So we have a lot of conversations, especially when we're talking about the ladder and self-control being one of the first rungs, why that's so foundational to everything in their life, because it teaches you how to put first things first and delay gratification. And so it's not necessarily the blue collar leadership book, but it's the same foundation as to why those things are same principles, why those things are so important to me. Last week, or actually just a few days ago, the topic was, what if my friend hurts me? And we just decided to talk. It's not informal, it's not the dinner table, but this is our hour section that we sit down as a family just to talk about something. What would you do if your friend hurt you? How would that make you feel? What principles can we look at? Because in reality, that's what happens in life, right?
Throughout life.
Throughout life. Exactly. So that's how it really has affected me. The next week, I got to look at what we're doing next week is how can I take constructive criticism? And that's what we're going to cover on our next one.
That's
what
good.
Does it mean? Yeah.
How's that impacted your family dynamics? You guys, when you started doing that, I don't know how long you've been doing it, but how did just doing that at home change your family dynamics, that 1 hour a week?
Yeah. So the hour a week is dedicated. We try to keep communication open all the time. You get busy households, it makes it difficult. But if they know the hour a week is just to relax and just talk about whatever's on their mind, but we'll lead it with a theme, it's helpful because you're encouraging honesty. We're not interested in the right answer. We're interested in what's on what's on your heart. And I feel the same way here at work as well. I'm not interested in someone just giving the quote unquote right answer. I'd rather hear what they really feel. So even if we're studying Blue Collar Leadership book and someone says, I don't agree with what Max said, I'm not butthurt about that. Well, okay, let's talk about that.
Me neither.
Why don't you agree? Exactly. Why don't you agree? This is not a session of like, you will listen and agree with this. It's not about that. It's about, let's have some dialogue and figure it out, because most of the time it's just because of a filter. It's because they had some negative validation, but they're directing it to the wrong place.
Yeah, I always
You're
tell
saying
people,
the principle was wrong, and it wasn't the principle that was wrong.
yeah, when people, because when we speak, I encourage people, especially those that disagree with anything we're saying, speak up when we're speaking. If the group's small enough that you can't do it with 1,500 people, but you can do it
Right.
with 10 or 20 or 50 or maybe even 100. But usually what I find out is, and it ain't about me being right, but usually what I find out is I'm right, but so are they. They just looking at it from a different perspective. So once we get it cleaned out, what I was seeing and saying was right, and what they were seeing and saying was right, but the two things didn't go together. They were seeing what I was saying in a wrong light, so it made them see it wrong. So once we get it straightened out, I agree with them from their perspective, and they agree with me from my perspective, and then that actually helps everybody in the room, because a lot of times they were seeing it one way or the other, but just hearing their perspective helps me, helps other people to see, oh, somebody can see this completely different. And because a lot of times we can only think about how we see something from our own perspective. So that's good stuff, Kym. So
yeah, I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, I said that I think the bottom line is respect. Obviously, nobody's perfect. We all have bad days. In fact, I'm just going to say, just in our last discussion at home in the family, we had something, I behaved in a way that kind of was against the way I'm teaching, because sometimes we all have moments, let's just admit. But I brought it up, and I said, did you guys remember when I said this yesterday? And they just laughed. Yes.
They didn't miss it, did they?
They never miss anything. They did. Your kids do not miss anything. So we just talked about it. I said, what do you think was the reason why that happened? And I said, this is from my perspective why that happened. It had nothing to do with the thing that I said I was upset about, because it had nothing to do with that. It was something else. And I said, when you get into relationships, and you've seen that with your mom, who clearly has read a lot, you have to give yourself grace, but no excuses. So if you feel like you're stuck, or you should know better, or this, you should know better than this. Okay, you should, and you do, but you had a moment. You have to come back and reconcile that, and not just verbally apologize, but just, if you happen to impact somebody else, let them know. Say, you know what, I when I did this or said this or whatever yesterday, I realized that wasn't kind, or whatever. That's a hard thing to do, because that's not encouraged. Humility is not encouraged. It's more like, well, if I'm just quiet about it, they'll know. They'll know I'm sorry. Well, not necessarily. That's not how to build trust, and that's not teaching. So, one thing with my family is we try to do. I want them to know that if you're having a bad day, it's okay. And if you really mess up, okay, just pause and come back to it. But that's part of you building your self-control. Nobody gets that perfect. We're gonna have moments. I was reading actually Brene Brown, which a lot of people know about now, but she has a book called Dare to Lead, and she was talking about a moment in her book where she sent off this really angry response, shameful, which she's a shame researcher, right? Email on accident, to somebody, and she talks really openly about it. And I thought it was funny, because even if we really make a big mistake that could be a very public one, there's still a way to deal with it.
Yeah, that's powerful. So you've been reading a lot, I know. What's your favorite book that you tell people they need to read when you come across just somebody in general? I don't expect it to be mine, but it doesn't matter. You don't only have to talk about my stuff. I don't care what you talk about.
I have a list, because I think you can just learn from. I know you pull from lots of stuff, right?
Yeah, there's a lot right there behind me.
Right. It depends. And I will say this. I do like Dare to Lead, and it depends on who I'm talking to.
Yep.
So I'm on my second. I read it, and then now on my Audible listen because I listened to it on walk. I really appreciate her perspective, and that's by Brene Brown. Um, let's see. Obviously, the classic 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But if you don't love to read, I would say read the one for teens.
Yeah. Leah says the same
Because
thing.
yeah, it's the same principle, but just broken down for younger. And sometimes that simple just works for me too. Simpler.
Yep.
Um, I would say probably, I would say Total Money Makeover,
Okay.
um, by Dave Ramsey. I know that sounds strange because we weren't talking about money just now, but
But it's personal
uh,
leadership, right?
it's leadership from it's financial perspective. And the reason why I say that is because whether you agree with the principles or not in the book, a lot of times people go through a lot of hardship because of financial concerns.
Yeah.
And so when you give that attention, it could free yourself enough to give other things attention. Not that that's an excuse to not give it attention, but it's a real thing. So if someone doesn't know where their, rent is coming from and they're trying to come to work and you're saying, "Hey, read Blue Collar Leadership." There might be there might be a little bit of a block there because they're very much concerned about whether they're going to have a house the next month. So it's
Yeah.
going to be a barrier to absorbing other things. So, I really would encourage someone to look at their own. I don't care if you make $5 an hour or you shouldn't be because that's illegal, but you know what I mean? You make bare
Yeah.
minimum wage, or if you are making high six figures, it really doesn't matter. They're just principles in how to have self-control and save money. So that's why I'd say that one. But as far as just personal leadership, it would be several. The other one would be one of my favorites, and I alluded to going back and learning about why you are the way you are.
Yeah.
I do like Own Your Past, Change Your Future, because it
Okay.
teaches you to figure out, since we all got backpacks full of bricks and baggage that we carry for whatever reason, find out what they are and then learn how to put the bricks down. Because once you do that, you'll be able to kind of turn off the alarms and the noise a little bit so
Yeah.
that you can improve in other ways. Because sometimes without knowing why you are the way you are, um, you'll just be an endless reading all this leadership stuff or just personal development stuff and still trying to wonder why you can't seem to make that much progress like you quote unquote should be. And maybe because you don't know where you came from. So
Yeah.
that's why I would say that one.
Yeah, that's a good set of books, and really it's a holistic approach. All those books hit you from
Mm-hmm.
different angles, and that's what we all have to do, right? Eventually, we got to hit it from all the angles. And the money book you're talking about, that's a financial perspective.
Right.
I mean that's one thing I encourage everyone to. Our goal in life, most people are looking for security and stability, but what they need is freedom and options. And when you're in debt up to your
Exactly.
eyeballs, freedom and options ain't something you got, and it makes life super, super hard.
It makes your decisions different. And where you could have been on a path where you're so paralyzed by fear for something else. So that's why I was saying whether you agree with everything is not the point. Is It's to bring awareness to
Absolutely.
the way things are set up so that you don't make decisions based on what someone else thinks you are. You're making educated decisions, and that should not be relegated to just a few, you know, people who might be savvy in those areas. It's for everybody because they
Yeah.
don't teach that in school. I'm not getting political here or anything like that. I'm just being
Yep.
factual.
Yep.
Might get degrees, but nobody taught you how to balance your check register.
Not not anymore. They don't.
Not anymore. Not that we have checks, but we get the
Yep.
idea.
Yep. Yeah. You still got to know how to do it and keep up with it and reconcile the ins and outs of your finances for
Hmm.
sure. So, yeah, I know you shared your LinkedIn with Rhea, and she's been popping it up on the screen. She'll probably pop it up now. But why should someone reach out to you? Why did you want to share that? Where you're at. Should it reach out just personally or just professionally or some of both? Because why,
I
why
think
why
some
would you
of
want
both.
someone to reach out?
I think some of both. I think, to be honest, one of the things I have to be cognizant of that I have neglected because I got my hands is networking. Uh, I should say well, maybe networking. I don't really love the word, but you know what I mean.
Yep. Yeah.
Making connections. That's better.
Yeah. There you
So
go.
yeah, making connections. I think it's important for me personally, but also professionally, because I need to be exposed what other people are doing because that will trigger maybe some ideas. So I would definitely encourage, if you hear this and you want to make a connection for whatever reason, go ahead and message me on the LinkedIn, and I will make a cognitive effort, a cognizant effort to touch base with you and see what
Okay.
you're doing, and maybe I can learn something.
Well, we really appreciate you participating and being a part of the Real People Getting Real Results, because you getting real results. I mean, most people are not doing it. And yes, life is hard. And if I always tell people, if your life's good right now, just hang on, keep living, because there's a tsunami coming for you if you just keep living long enough. That's the way life is, right? We figure that out as we get
Yeah.
older. We have to enjoy those calm times because something else is coming. That's just life. So anything you want to share that you didn't share, or that I didn't ask you that you actually want to talk about?
First of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys as not just, somebody I met in business, but as friends as well. It's very helpful in our journey. We are keep on keeping on. So we look forward to speaking with you again to see what our newest effort is. I know there's some talk about redoing, which we will, not just talk, our whole nother book study. And I'll let Kevin later perhaps talk to you a little bit about that. But never stop asking questions. I would say
Mm,
that. Just
yeah.
don't stop asking questions. And I always look to self improve.
Yes, people don't give that enough credit. I mean, especially people
Yeah.
who don't know, or just like a lot of people hear self help and they think that means they're weak or something's wrong with them,
Hmm.
or something. But a lot of people just don't have that awareness. So again, thank you, because you're
Hmm.
introducing people to that growth.
Oh, and one more thing, I think, just last thing is try to, if you're going to have a succession plan, whether in your personal and where you work, take the attitude that you want to share what you know, and try to be around people that are smarter than you, that you think are smarter than you, that you can learn from. It's not a threat, it's a gift.
Yeah,
um, it's definitely a gift, because one, not only can you learn from them, but two, you bring a lot of value to your organization when you put down your own ego
yeah,
and
yeah,
you try to bring somebody in and let them shine.
yep. How often, Kim? You just made me think of something I want to ask you, if you don't mind. You got a few more
No,
minutes?
it's yeah, sure.
So, how often? I assume you see lots of applications and resumes.
Hmm.
You do a lot of the hiring. Probably other people do too, but you're really involved with it, I assume.
Mostly, yes.
And
I'm usually
so,
the
how
face.
often do you see people? Because I encourage people who read leadership development books and personal growth books. I actually got a podcast. Anybody listening to this episode 26 on my Blue Collar Leadership podcast, but I encourage people to include, like not just a resume or not just what you're asking for, but if I was doing it, I'd have a list of my top 10 or top 15 books, when I read them, what they were. Do you ever see anybody that actually does that? Because what I try to tell people is, if you do that, you're going to stand out to somebody like you. Somebody did that for you, you're probably going to talk to those people no matter what. You probably would talk to them. I'm just asking. I ain't trying to put words
I
in your mouth.
don't see that much. And if I can't even remember, if I'm going to be honest, the last time I saw that. For whatever reason, we've got stuck in the culture that we're so concerned about the format being exactly right that it just looks like everybody else. I would
Yeah,
much rather see someone transparent about, like, this is what I would like. These are the last books that I've read. I know, I keep a track of what I've read. But no, I don't see that. So I would really encourage people, if it's true,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
lie.
yeah.
But if it's true, show a little bit more of your personality and your true self, when you're putting something out there, and keep it simple. I'm not really interested, and probably most HR managers or directors I know aren't interested in all the technical terms unless it's required,
Yeah.
because just say in simple terms what you do and why you like it, what you do, and what impact that you've made. That stands out so much better.
Okay. Well, That's some good advice and good tips. I appreciate that. So I really appreciate you being on again, and I look forward to hopefully getting Kevin and Mike, because I guess just sidetrack one more time. Kevin, I know he went, I guess because of the book studies you were doing with everybody, he decided to do. He used Who's Buying You.
Yes,
Till
he
you sell
did.
yourself, you won't sell much. He facilitated a book study with the national sales team spread out across the country, and I got on and participated with them. So that was pretty cool. And he told me recently they're starting another book, and so they're continuing on. So you guys have got a lot of stuff going on, because a lot of companies, the sales team gets left out. Even when companies do this, the sales team, they don't get left out of development, but they get left out of doing book study type stuff. Usually the sales teams are the ones sometimes go to a lot of conferences because they're networking and that kind of stuff. So they get a lot of development, but most of the time they don't get the book study type development.
Right. To shine a spotlight, yes, he has really taken that and running, and I'll let him tell you more about it. But as far as the inside sales teams, because that was a lot of the outside sales team.
Okay, yeah.
We do continue the book study every week. So we just started another book on Mondays at 12, and we're just figuring out logistically, because of schedules and things on the production floor, like I mentioned, to reinstitute to make sure everybody gets a chance to go through the other book again, whether it's going to be the same thing again or something else, to be determined. But yeah.
Okay. So, well, I really appreciate it. Stick around after we wrap up here, but thank you again for joining us, Kym.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.
Bye.